Greetings. Welcome to In Conversation with Trevor, brought to you by Heart and Soul Broadcasting Services. I go beyond the headlines and beyond the sensational. Today I'm in conversation with Dr. Ibbo Mandaza, political analyst, publisher, and convener of the SAPES Trust. If you enjoy this conversation, remember to subscribe, to like, and to share. Ibbo, I am delighted that I finally pinned you down.
Oh,
welcome.
Always good to see you.
Ibbo, if things had gone according to plan, you'd been in South Africa for the OR Tambo lecture, which our good friend Fikile Mbalula decided it shouldn't go ahead. And there's a thing in his letter where he says, the ANC is engaged in delicate conversations concerning the Zimbabwean situation. In the first instance, what was your response when you heard that the lecture had been postponed? And secondly, are you aware of this delicate conversation supposed to be taking place?
Well, in the first place, I didn't know. I was out in Chiwota yesterday to bury a relative.
Condolences.
So out of the network, and when I get in, I see this communication, missed call from my brother and comrade David Masondo. So he says, look, what had happened, he told me, was that in the morning, this was built 2 weeks ago already, that I would speak today, this evening at 8:00. And he tells me, look, there was an anonymous message poster declaring that the lecture was postponed. They didn't know where it came from. So they issued a statement saying, no, the lecture is still on. And then came Mbalula's directive, sent from Harare, that the lecture must be off. Yeah, that's the first. And I said to David
Masondo,
I said, David, don't understand the import of that letter, particularly since you are a functionary of the ANC. If I were, I wouldn't defy them. Let's go with it. Let's postpone it.
Yeah.
Indefinitely, but no confrontation. Said fine. And then the rest is history, as you know. The second question is, yes, I do suspect that there has been some discussions between the ANC and Zanu over the elections.
Yeah.
But I doubt that Trevor would be the one, and not Trevor, I mean...
David Masondo. Fikile Mbalula
would be the one in charge of it. Because as it turned out, when Cyril left on Tuesday evening...
after the inauguration,
he left straight away. And Mbalula and his deputy were left. It appears to me they were discussing mainly Zanu ANC matters. I doubt that Fikile would be of the capacity to deal with what he calls delicate issues. But I have no doubt that it had been conveyed either over the weekend or subsequently that the region was not happy about the elections. There's no... I took two hints from what Cyril said when he was interviewed on SABC. He was asked, why are you congratulating Mnangagwa? He said, well, it's protocol. When the Electoral Commission announces somebody as a winner, as regional partners, neighborhood, we have to congratulate him. But that does not preempt the necessity of looking at the report. He said that.
The SADC body has issued a preliminary report. They are still going to sit down together with many other observers and analyze everything. So let's wait until all that comes out. But the Electoral Commission in Zimbabwe has made a declaration, and it is on that basis that we have issued our congratulatory message.
And secondly, I would say that he came for the inauguration on the same note, but also in addition, I'll say that there would have been conversations with other heads of state over the weekend. And many of whom would have said, look, sir, you're going to the inauguration, represent us, but also convey the message to Harare that we're not happy with what has happened. So I think that the nature of the SADC report, not only SADC report, although everyone is emphasizing that, but all the other reports, I met the observers myself, both the heads of missions and individuals, all were acutely embarrassed about what they saw. All. Jonathan, Mumba, the Namibian delegation, notwithstanding the grandstanding when they got back home to criticize the report, they all said this is the worst election they've ever seen. So there is consensus about the election, that this is, I mean, you and I were here. I mean, I've never seen such.
It's the worst we've ever witnessed, Ibbo.
It was incredible.
What a disaster.
Yeah.
I will get to the observers. Your sentiments, I think in the night or during the evening, you said elections brazenly stolen and the voters rendered mere useless statistics, deplorable, depressing. That's what you said. And for me, the deplorable and depressing continues. As you're driving around Harare, the city, you can sense it. It's as if something came and punctured the whole nation. There is no excitement.
Funeral.
It's worse than a funeral.
Your own comment, I retweeted it. You know?
It's worse than a funeral. At a funeral, people are crying.
Yes.
Here, nobody's crying.
No.
But you can see that they are hurting.
There was a very pertinent tweet that you posted. I retweeted it. It really explains the mood following elections, not this election alone, but all previous elections.
But this one is worse.
Yeah, it's terrible. And for me, the most depressing is the extent to which people's votes are stolen. People queue for hours to be heard, and then you glibly steal their vote. For me, that's the most cynical part of the electoral process. I wish we had an alternative to elections, but every time elections come, I couldn't go to my home area during the election because my people told me, you come here, you put us in trouble. They may not harm you, but when you leave, you'll be in trouble. So I was meeting them for the first time in 6 months at a funeral yesterday. And they told me, I mean, it was horror as usual. Every election is horror. You know, people that are regimented, they are forced onto buses. It's incredible. And for me, what depresses me most is that our people here are so defensive. I saw the Charambas and them issuing some crazy statements, you know, attacking Mumba. But hell, we're all here. We saw it for ourselves. So what is it, you know?
We saw it for ourselves. And
it's the only country in the region that does that. Every election is a war zone. Every election is rigged. I was talking to somebody, former head of state. I won't mention him. He was saying to me a few months ago, why you guys look for odd elections in Zimbabwe? Every election is rigged in Zimbabwe. And he has been here as observer, as head of state. So the reputation of Zimbabwe and rigging of elections is now legion. You know?
Talk to me, Ibbo, about, we've been here since every election, since 1980.
I was here for the first election.
We continue doing it.
Yes.
Why is Zanu PF so intent on holding on to power, being so crude? I mean, take the FAZ desk, FAZ, desk outside the polling stations.
K. Alleged intimidation of voters. The mission was informed that the rural vote may be compromised by alleged intimidation attributed to a group called Forever Associates Zimbabwe FAZ, which is said to be a quasi-security intelligence organization. The group was said to have been deployed towards and around 36,000 villages. Allegations were that people were intimidated to vote in a particular manner and were warned that it would be easy to determine who voted against certain parties.
Is it somebody inside who's doing this to discredit the election? Or what's happening? I can't understand when you know that there's observers watching.
I think it's our political culture to begin with. A political culture which goes back to nationalist days, when conformity was the rule. You conform if you're in Zimbabwe, you must conform. If you're in Zanu, you must conform.
You must conform.
And people blame it on the one-party state tradition of the Eastern Europe. I don't think so. I think it goes back to what Ali Mazrui called the monarchical tendency in African politics, where the leader is king. You conform. If you don't conform, you're enemy.
Out. You're the enemy.
Secondly, the extent to which in Zimbabwe in particular, opposition movements are treated as enemy to be vanquished. Whether
the media and the opposition are
whether it
enemies
was
of the
ZAPU and Joshua Nkomo, enemies. Almost killed Joshua. He didn't escape.
Of course.
Edgar Tekere and Zoom.
Almost killed him too.
Morgan Tsvangirai, almost killed. Right? Now, this young man. So opposition is regarded as enemy, to be vanquished. Almost creating an irony. Why do you have the so-called democracy? When you, as Stephen Chan put it the other day, Zimbabwe has just opened a new parliament. There's
the Chinese built.
Yeah, the front bench.
Okay.
And the front bench. Don't you want a front bench of opposition? No? They don't want it.
No.
So it's a strange paradox. But also it exposes both ignorance and secondly, the extent to which elections now are used as a legitimating agency for the illegitimate. And it's pandering to the West. And I've asked the Western countries, why do you insist on these elections as a center of democracy? And they are here. They pulled millions into the elections. EU, Carter Center, they pushed money into the election. Regardless of the warning lights.
You're talking of warning lights. One other comment that you said, which I found significant. You said, regrettably, CCC stumbled into a flawed exercise and witnessed the entire sham. The worst in the history of elections in Zimbabwe. We are back to the future. Could this have been avoided?
It could have been. If also to highlight the flaws in our electoral law, to highlight the problems that have confronted us over the last 3, 5 elections, to force the system to come to some kind of consensus. There's need for reform. But in the face of non-reform, you stumble into it. Stumble was a modest.
Yeah.
Was a modest
term.
I had a word with Shamisa on Saturday. Last Saturday, and he says, I know you're one of those who advise that we shouldn't go into the elections. Well, I think we just as well went into the elections because it exposes the system for what it is. I didn't want to argue with him. I said, maybe you're right, and I'm wrong, But my point was not just grandstanding if they had stood away from the election. It was really to highlight the same problems we've had for the last elections. And you cannot continue going into it, regardless. And here we are, back to square one.
What's the option? What's the alternative to not participating?
The ultimate option is mass action. That would be the one.
Yeah.
And I'm told that on polling day, when the ballot papers were delayed into the afternoon, early evening, some in the CCC said, look, let's go on the streets. And
the
leadership as pacifists said no. Maybe it's right, because one of the things discussions we had in the SAPES Trust policy dialogue a few weeks ago, we've been doing an audit of the electoral process. And the conclusion was that these elections are flawed. They will not yield the kind of results we want in terms of a free, fair, credible election. And one of the chaps who was from the US, a Zimbabwean, who has worked for ZESN for many years, he says, well, let's make a resolution that if Nelson goes ahead with the election and the inevitable happens, he must not push people onto the streets. He must take responsibility on his own. It was really telling. Wow. Yeah. Why should people die for him? He has taken a decision in their name, So I I hope that we have learned enough of lessons about failed elections in Zimbabwe and the reasons thereof. And that's why, we are pushing for the petition.
The petition. Before we get onto the petition, which is a very important thing, I just want us to spend a bit of time on the observer missions. I think you've just indicated that a lot of people are putting a lot of stock on the SADC report, because there's a SADC rules on how you conduct elections, isn't it? And I think Zanu PF has also tended to brandish the SADC report more than any. Now that the SADC is disagreeing with Zanu PF, for the first time, Zanu PF is going for them. The Commonwealth report was also very strong in many respects. The Carter Center report was very strong. I mean, how...
And the AU report.
The AU report.
The election fell short of many regional and international standards, including equality, universality, and transparency.
Yes.
How does Mnangagwa and them sustain legitimacy in the face of this?
No, they are wounded. The kind of disparagement of the SADC report in particular is because the SADC report goes to the heart of the matter. It's your own organization telling you have failed.
Yeah.
And hence the clumsiness with which Mumbai is being attacked. Clumsiness.
Childishness.
Childish. I saw Charamba's inane statement, and wishing that this thing will be killed and Zimbabwe takes over in August next year. The real we wrote the rules. I was involved in the writing of the rules. The organ document 1996.
Organ for security,
politics, defense, and security. It was initiated by Zimbabwe. We were asked to do it at SAPES and ratified in Botswana.
Am I right that President Mnangagwa was the first head of that organization?
Yes, he was.
He was.
Yeah, he pushed it.
Now it's inconvenient.
It's very clear. Once there is a disputed election according to the SADC rules, it has to be discussed. And as much as our petition is based on a view that there should be a transitional government, the protocol says that. That was one of the options. Either you go for rerun or you negotiate. In 2008, he's informed by the same background, if you remember.
Yes, I do. Genuine.
Yeah, and Mbeki and his colleague, Mbeki in particular, ignored the reality. I remember I was friends with the Makalima, who was ambassador.
Yeah.
And he said, let's apply the SADC protocols. Condemn this election. Mbeki refused. He flew into Harare after the runoff. Remember, he sent generals here to look at the violence. And I had a discussion with Romano, who was head of the delegation. I took a number of people who had lost their hands to this South African embassy. He broke down in tears. And he showed me the report as we flew together to Joburg. He was still in Joburg at that time.
Yes.
It was telling, and yet that report was published, but it caused ripples in the ANC to the extent that in June 2008, a cabinet committee was set up on Zimbabwe to look at and you know what happened?
Yeah.
They condemned the runoff, but Mbeki flew in. Bob was sworn in at midnight. She was sick. And they flew together to Egypt, to the summit, AU summit.
Do you think, before we take a break, Ibbo, my sense is it's going to be difficult to push the SADC report under the carpet. Cyril has to face the SADC report. Cyril has to face his comrade, the Zambian president. Is a stage being set for some form of negotiation that could result in a GNU, a transitional arrangement? What's your sense? You said you noted the import of Fikile Mbalula's letter. What is being choreographed here?
A GNU in the making. A GNU in the making. That's why we're making a distinction between a GNU and transitional government. We'll come to that. But
yeah,
I believe, I know, because apropos our petition, I've been in touch with all the governments in the region, at the level of ministries of information, of foreign affairs, I mean. It's clear that this would not be put under the carpet.
There is clearly no legitimacy.
Yeah, no legitimacy. And someone even said that the inauguration of Emmerson can be reversed under the rules, clearly. Conversely, this is why Emmerson and them pushed for
the rush.
In the same way that Bob did in 2008.
Same script.
Yeah, same script to preempt a SADC position. Okay. Now, will SADC allow that again? I don't think so.
Ibbo, I'm going to hold you there. Let's take a break. Don't go away. When we come back, Ibbo and I are going to get into the petition that Ibbo and Tony Ryler have initiated, which is picking up quite a lot of momentum. So see you on the other side.
Clearly, Emmerson cannot rule this country in the backdrop of the SADC report.
Welcome back to our conversation with Dr. Ibbo Mandaza, political analyst, publisher, and the director of the SAPES Trust. Ibbo, when you look at the scorecard after the elections, as you and I sit here, the country is worse off than before the elections. Legitimacy is gone. It's worse. National fragility is a huge issue. Toxicity is going to be high. The sanctions issue even raises a bigger head. Commonwealth admission is off the table. Engagement, which ED has been talking about, is almost dead. So what was the point?
I think looking back a few months ago, and I got this from very reliable quarters, Emmerson didn't want elections. If also because he knew to be messy. And I think also knew that he's unelectable.
Absolutely.
And he sent out emissaries to Shamisa in March, around there. So let's postpone the elections for 2 years. Let's have a government of national unity. And in 2 years, I hand over. I'm going. I asked my informant who were the emissaries, and they named them. People in Emmerson's cabinet, the inner core. I went further. I wanted to know what was the rationale behind the argument for this postponement, GNU. And the response was that the military were too involved in elections. And the one way of putting pay to that was to have this. Well, I didn't want to pursue the discussion, but I sort of understood that the military was meant Chwenga,
Yeah.
But later on I realized FAS. All this, remember, many of Emmerson's inner core lost in the primaries because of FAS. But this was a conversation a few days before Sharumbira's disastrous
Karanga deal.
Yeah, Karanga deal. And there was clearly a relationship between the offer being made surreptitiously, so to speak, to Shamisa and the Karanga deal. Now, well, I know reliably that Shamisa refused the deal.
Okay.
If also because he believed he was going to win the election anyway, But I mention this because I think that I would not be surprised if Emmerson throws up the idea of a GNU now to preempt the SADC action, whatever it might be. And in keeping with it's all indication that he wants to leave in the next 2 years.
That's 2025.
He's not young. He says 81, but we know from our own records he was born 1938. He's 85 next week, the 12th of September. So he's young.
I've heard 2025 mentioned a number of times.
Yeah, for the different reasons.
Yeah.
But I think mainly, I think that he trying to avoid the Mugabe fiasco, where you overstay. But also he's been battered. This has been a difficult time for him.
But this doesn't help in any way. This sticky situation where we are doesn't help him in any way.
Well, this is where the SADC heads of state have to put their heads together on the strength of all this information and indeed what he might have told them. And one of the things that has been worrying him is his failure to get the military back to the barracks. There's been a major problem for him. So all Paulo accounts, the men must be very tired, and so I have reason to believe he wants to use the next 2 years as transition exit. He has to get out peacefully. Yeah? There are too many imponderables.
There is.
Yes.
Let's go to your petition, Ibbo, which you initiated with Tony Rila to the SADC organ for politics, defense, and security. And it's titled A Call for Political Settlement in Zimbabwe. My question, why the petition?
Well, we had done a petition before for Sikala, if you remember.
Yeah.
And we thought a petition is about the best way of, one, mobilizing the population.
Yeah.
And raising consciousness thereof, of the issues at hand. And secondly, we are also helpless as civil society. What else can you do? And thirdly was to more or less a favorable response to the SADC report. We thought people are all quiet about it. And I remember I tweeted once that where's Cyril, where's Ichlema? The man has spoken Mumba. And
he needs support.
He's being savage in Harare. Yeah. So those are the things that informed the petition. And like all petitions, never know the response, but we have over 30,000.
Yeah. When I looked at it yesterday, you were over 30,000.
Yeah.
And you're averaging around 300, 400 signatures a day.
And that's substantial.
So well done for that. That's hugely substantial. For Zimbabweans out there, I think this is an opportunity for you to, if you really care about this country, if you don't want to go onto the streets, maybe putting your signature on that petition is a way for you to show that you do care about this country.
Like Trevor did.
Absolutely. I signed the petition and tweeted, tried to contribute. It wouldn't take my money, but I think it's a technology issue. So let's just break down the components of the petition. What are you proposing in the petition? If we could go through
the first three main issues. The first is to acknowledge that the elections were flawed. So that's the first. The second, that we have always called for a immediate settlement in Zimbabwe. I put it since 2016. Remember?
Yeah, I do.
The idea of a transitional authority.
You, by the way, before you go on, you are also convener of the Concerned Citizens.
Yeah, platform for citizens.
So these things tie in.
Yeah,
together.
tie in. Yeah.
Okay.
So we had been, just for your information, we had been in conversation with DECO in South Africa.
Department of...
since January, on the idea of an international conference on Zimbabwe towards a comprehensive political and economic settlement in Zimbabwe. And if need be, to preempt the elections, which we knew would be what they were. And I think you saw my article in the Sunday Times.
Yes, I did.
We said little in that, but it's very important for this program that they know. We had been discussing the idea of international conference on Zimbabwe, at the end of which would be appointed 3 or 4 eminent persons. And DECO, in our discussions, recommended Motlanthe, and we thought Obasanjo indicated in October already that he was quite prepared to. Then Kikwete in Tanzania and Uhuru. We've been in touch. I've been in touch with Kikwete, but he's also holding his cards to himself. But basically, we believe that the eminent persons will be the ones to negotiate whatever is to be concluded in Zimbabwe. We didn't feel as facilitators strong enough or legitimate enough to represent any interest. We thought the eminent persons would be the ones to canvass opinion in Zimbabwe and in the diaspora. Well, DECO was agreeable. The meeting should have been held in June, but it depended very much on Cyril. And so an appointment was set up for me to see Cyril several times, never got to meet him. I met his wife at a funeral in Joburg, and she, on her part, was kind enough to convey my message. I got a call from Cyril's office. I'm still waiting for the appointment. But it was clear to me that the DECO, in particular, the minister who was a former student of mine in Botswana, and Zane Dango, the DG, are on the same page with you and I about Zimbabwe. And they've been thinking about it. So when we came with this initiative, they were happy to. But of course, you can't move without South Africa. Our reading is that anything to do with Zimbabwe, South Africa has to be central to it. And anybody who tries to avoid that, notwithstanding the problems like Balula, would be really self-defeating.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so
the petition
so waiting to hear.
Yeah.
So the petition now is, we thought we use the formalities of the organ, which is the one in charge of elections, but which is the entry point into the summit, to get the petition to Zambia, to Chilema as head of the organ. We have succeeded. It's gone. They asked for a copy on Saturday. We gave them. And I'm on standby to go up there if necessary. But it's now in the public domain. Yeah.
One interesting thing that you do, a couple of things actually. The cleaning up of our electoral laws, reform, removing military interference, constitutionalism and rule of law. You also suggest establishment of a sovereign fund. You share with the viewers the thinking around that.
Well, I mean, the reputation or the history of sovereign funds is now known. The most successful one being the one in Norway, where a proportion of the revenues from the oil, North Sea oil, has been invested for posterity into the national fiscus, into the national program of Norway. So the idea really was that the idea of a sovereign fund is overdue. I believe it's there on paper. But the idea was to see how these enormous revenues from exports, especially our minerals, the diamond story.
Lithium.
Yeah, lithium. How that could be sort of kept in the sovereign fund.
For the benefit of the citizens.
And systematically invested in infrastructure, in health, in education. That's the whole idea. But we also had a footnote to that. The idea was to engage international experts who can trace the money stashed out there. Estimates are between $30 and $35 billion out there. You know, which the ADB report 2 weeks ago, through one of your papers, mentioned 23 billion, which has been lost in Zimbabwe through illicit financial flows. And I said to myself, that's underestimate. I mean, just gold mafia alone was a good 20. Take the 15 billion from diamonds. I mean,
there was a proposal made when the so-called dispensation came in that draw a line in the sand and say, whoever stole stuff, come up and tell us what you stole. And maybe you might be forgiven. You know what the South Africans did with the foreign investment by Afrikaners and that kind of stuff. And one thought that there would be an interest in doing something of that sort. But clearly, having seen what's happened over the past 5 years, nobody would in Mnangagwa's government would take this seriously, because most of them have been basically eating. They would be the people that have been taking the money out.
Now that you mentioned that, you remember when Tsumba was governor of the
Reserve Bank,
he did something like that to encourage. I think he raised the interest rates at home, which made it very prohibitive to borrow. So many of the elites
brought in the money.
I remember once walking into Rainbow Towers, and there was one of these Zimbabwean elites. Briefcase opened, there was a little blue change. So I went to greet him, and he had words and words of US dollars and pounds. He was changing at the window. But that was part of the game, to bring people to bring their money in. But as you said, no one speaks about it. When my friend came here in 2017, Peter Nyong'o came to give the Pan-African lecture at SAPES. And he arrived and said, Ibbo, I see no cranes in Harare. After the pirates in the Indian Ocean, Nairobi was booming. Because these pirates were investing in Nairobi. So he says, well, even 5 billion would be, there was no single crane. And now, I was in East Africa last year on a pilgrimage back to my roots, Tanzania, Dar es Salaam University. And they are 40 years ahead of us now.
It's heartbreaking.
I'm telling you.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking, and in a way, it gives you hope that the disaster that Nairobi and Dar es Salaam were, with the right kind of leadership,
yes,
things could turn. Ibbo, let me move you to. I was looking at the difference between the process towards the GNU and where we are right now. Do you see any similarities at all? You and I have already talked about. Did you get an invitation, by the way, to the inauguration?
No, I didn't.
No. You and I have already talked.
Did you want one?
I wanted to see whether you got one. We've already talked about the rushed inauguration. That's exactly what Robert Mugabe did. Rushed the inauguration, then the pressure from the region, and then MT and others and Robert Mugabe get to sit, and then a GNU comes out. Are there any similarities that you're seeing in this?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Talk to me about that.
The imperatives are quite self-evident. Clearly, Emmerson cannot rule this country in the backdrop of the SADC report and all the other reports. It's a big disaster for him. And there is no way. And given the backdrop I gave you about his intention to go in 2 years, I have no doubt that the GNU thing is in the offing. And that's why we are coming in with the idea of a transitional government, because transitional authority, I want to call it. The idea that they must go beyond the GNU. GNU was MDC and Zanu PF with disastrous consequences. It was not well defined in terms of who gets what. Like coalitions are defined as in Western Europe. It's clear definition. If there's a coalition between us here, we know the Minister of Finance, Minister of Defense, it's well defined. And two, it must be based on a reform agenda, such as we have in our petition. And thirdly, it must have a big component of civic society, by which I mean broadly academia, labor, women, youths, business,
churches,
diaspora. And we think that as per my view, that if you have 30 ministers, cabinet should be 10. 1/3 Zanu PF, 1/3 CCC, 1/3 the civic society, made up of, among them, technocrats, the Trevors, for example, who can infuse some kind of sense, play a mediation role between the two, right? Which are really are lacking in expertise. If Shamisa had won or allowed to win, what would be his government? Who would be there? So we think that this is one way of repairing the damage, get the transitional government to undertake reform, and then you have elections, partisan elections, if you wish. But we thought that, and if you ask my view again, how do you proceed? I would say that allow Emmerson to head the transitional government. Okay.
You trust him to do that?
No, but if you talk about transition and knowing the kind of difficulties that would be attendant to any attempt to have him marginalized, as long as he's party to a broader framework that includes technocrats, no problem.
That's clearly defined.
And also, the transition is an old man, and as all transitions go, you can just avoid the outgoing person is
No.
not to stand in the controversies. I would say I would go along with that, and provided it's well defined, and all of us understand what's to be done.
A couple of things there before we go to our second break. One, I think you've already indicated the GNU was a lost opportunity in terms of reform. And our good friend, Professor Adam Tambara, sitting there, the former Deputy Prime Minister, sitting where you're sitting right now, did admit that one of the key expected outcomes from the GNU was reforms, and they didn't do that. That's the first thing. The second thing, the sense, you and I were involved long back around transitional authority, and people are pushing back and saying, no, it would be illegal. You'd need what do you call it? Some plebiscite of some sort for people to say, let's go the TNA route. What's your views on that?
We have interrogated that issue, and we had the BTs and others make pronouncement on that. It's very simple. An act of parliament, such as was done for the Longest House.
Yeah.
Yes, it can be done.
Okay.
Such as was done for the GNU. Can be done.
Ibbo, I'm going to hold you there. We'll come back. When we come back, we're going to go to issues around the toxicity. How do we cure the toxicity in the country, the culture of our politics? Can that be changed? And I think indeed, would a TNA be a way of pressing the reset button? NTA. Would it be a way of pressing the reset button? Please don't go away. See you on the other side.
Coups have never been good for any country, But there was also a threat. Well, a coup begets a coup.
Welcome back to our conversation with Dr. Ibbo Mandaza, political analyst, publisher, and the director of the SAPES Trust. Ibbo, we've been saying for a long time that our country is broken. Our nation is broken. And in the petition that you and Tony Rila have put together, you do touch on that. So what is broken? It's our national institutions that have been personalized. The army, the military, ineffectiveness of parliament. And I have been saying for a long time that I don't think we can even trust the opposition to get into power now as things are and hope that they will reform.
No.
But when you say that, the opposition says, oh no, you're not a Democrat and so forth. But I really and honestly believe, Ibbo, we are so broken that this idea that the petition is running with is what we ought to be focused on. That's if some good is going to come out of this mess that we are in right now, is that we all get together and decide what kind of Zimbabwe do we want. Do you want to push back on that?
Yeah, precisely. We have even gone as far as saying, look, because there were all those accusations, allegations that Ibbo and them want to come into power through the back door. So we've declared publicly that we are facilitators of no intention of getting into any government, let alone a transitional government. We must be facilitators and remain so. I'm 75 years old now. I have no intention of getting into government at all. But that we believe we have a role to play. Now, ideally, or conventionally rather, a transition authority is possible when there's blood on the floor. When we have murdered half of ourselves. And people say, look, something has to, an armistice, Longest House.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if we've reached that stage yet.
I think we're almost there, but we're not yet there. But, continue.
Yeah. And I'm saying that with better reason, one could actually have a transition authority which preempts that. Do we have to have blood?
To get there?
No. So we really believe this is an opportunity, hence our petition. This is a time we can put our heads together with the facilitation of the region, South Africa in particular. I think it's possible.
So here's my point, Ibbo, and push as hard as you may. If you love Zimbabwe, you can't be happy with any of this stuff.
No.
You can't be happy with the way Nelson Chamisa is running his thing. You can't be happy with the way Mnangagwa is running Zimbabwe. They are not doing it for Zimbabwe. They're doing it for themselves. Okay? If you love Zimbabwe, you'd say, it's not about Nelson Chamisa or CCC. It's not about Zanu PF or Emmerson Mnangagwa. We're in a terrible place. We need healing. We need to come together. And how do we do that without saying, let's all come together, press the reset button, and start afresh? It's about the love for Zimbabwe, not the love of my political party. Do you want to push back?
I agree entirely. One of the most encouraging aspects since the petition was launched last Thursday, that we have had no coherent opposition to it. Neither from Zanu
except a couple of people that say, Mdara mauda kutonga ere.
Yeah, that's kind of stuff. But inane stuff, you know. And I remember even one of these, Matigari was a very prominent, he said, what's Ibbo smoking? And I answered him because I do interact with him on Twitter. I don't know who he is, but he is very competitive, on Twitter. And I think that people like that need to be, but they've gone silent now. And Triple C has been more ambivalent. I mean, I spoke to Shamis on Saturday. He claimed he had not seen the petition. I said, how is that possible? There's another story, but I said, your own spokesman has retweeted it. What's it, Mkwananzi?
Yeah.
And many others, I don't want to mention names, but they've signed. Many in the diaspora have signed the petition. I can only say that there is consensus really on need of resetting, right? The problems will be how to go about it, the dynamics. So that's why we're thinking that if get outside mediators who will understand what you and I want, and then begin canvassing and getting opinions of people, and eventually assist in the formation of this transitional government.
My sense, Ibbo, is that anybody who doesn't sign up to the petition that he put together is after a power grab. And we should not allow a power grab that's sectional. That's for one side and not the other side. We're in such a terrible place that we really honestly need all of us. And your definition of who should be around the table, for me, is inclusive. And that's where we want to be going.
Yes. But one thing which is very encouraging is that, notwithstanding the ignorant outpourings on the subject, the transitional authority is good for everybody.
Absolutely.
The winners and the losers. And I remember that when we coined this term, 2016, Morgan Tsvangirai refused it outright. He said, why must I waste my time? I'm winning the elections 2018.
But that's the thing, it's not about you winning the elections.
And Zanu PF guys were saying, we're in power, why must you worry? But you found that the attitude towards the NTA softened on the part of those who lost in the coup. They began talking about it. And now clearly you can imagine who's calling for it. I know intuitively, not factually, intuitively, that Triple C and including Shamis himself will be groping at the idea of a transitional government. Even they don't understand the mechanisms around it, And especially now that we are saying no, we don't want Zanu PF no 3C to drive the process. No, we can all do it together, but we want any of them to be in charge of the process.
Because I think the other bottom line, Ibbo, is that the two parties are really a minority. When you look at the bigger population, as it were, the 60 million of us. Anyway, let's proceed to another very important issue. I believe that if you make democratic expression by the electorate impossible, the electorate will find other means to express themselves. Like you're saying, people are saying, if Chamisa does ABCD, don't allow the people to go onto the streets. We've seen coups in Gabon. We've seen coups in Mali. We've seen coups in Niger, Burkina Faso, Sudan, and Guinea. We had a coup here, which was an expression of an internal altercation as we should take over. Should we not be avoiding this kind of thing? I know there's a different reason of explaining each coup, but at the bottom of it is disenchantment with why certain people are in power and others are not in power. Do you see this being a threat for us?
Yeah, no, I hope it doesn't happen. We have all said, as political economists, coups have never been good for any country, But there was also the threat. Well, a coup begets a coup.
Of course.
And what we have is, what's even worse, is the blessing of the coup legally.
Through the ballot paper.
In Chiweshe judgment.
Oh, right. Oh, yes.
Chiweshe judgment, ipso facto, says that the military is entitled to intervene. So we have de facto a military government.
I've forgotten about
that. Yeah, it's very telling. And unless that is cured, we're not going anywhere. That's why we talk about restoration of constitutionalism. We have a coup government in place. We have a military, securocrat government in place.
Which brings the other point, Ibbo, that the judiciary has been messed up.
Ooh.
So all that needs to be cured.
Oh, yes.
Who is interested in doing that except the entire citizenry?
We should go the way Kenya went a few years ago.
Yes.
They had every judge resign. And those who didn't want to resign, they had to give good reason why they couldn't. 90% resigned.
But remember, it had to come to a head of tremendous bloodshed in Kenya.
Yes.
For Kenyans to do that.
2007.
Do we need to get there?
I hope not.
Ibbo, you're doing an amazing job. Before I let you go, through the Concerned Citizens platform and the SAPES Trust, you're saying you're how old are you now?
75.
75. Why do you do this stuff?
Well, I've been into politics initially inadvertently as a young boy. My brothers were big in Zapu. I was taking Highfields, and then on to university at a time when national sports was bubbling. So in many ways, I'm a product of history. Most of my generation ended up in the struggle, and so it's it's a commitment to this country. That this is a great country. And I always say, I was speaking to Bishop Bakare yesterday, and I said, how are you? He says, I'm very sad, frustrated. And I said, well, come from a bishop. Let me tell you, there is a tomorrow in Zimbabwe. And it's the idea of the tomorrow that keeps me going. We live in the neighborhood. I mean, I lived in Zambia, I've lived in Tanzania, I've lived in Mozambique. And I've seen this country's turn around. And some years ago, we were discussing turnaround. We say 18 months we can turn this country around. 18.
So you have hope?
Oh, yeah, 18 months. And we have the skills. I mean, one of the options, we were talking about the options, one was mass uprising, coup, and so on. One of the options which Zimbabweans have taken is leave the country. We have 75% of our professional people outside the country. 6 million Zimbabweans out there. The right side of it, of course, is that remittance is almost 2 billion a year. But which country can survive when half of your soul is out there?
Half of your talent is out there.
No, so we have to rectify this. And this reform agenda we're talking about includes that. Dealing with the diaspora, making them part of ourselves, which they are, So there is a tomorrow. When I see Zambia, I'll just come around. When I see Tanzania, where 1980 there was no sugar in the hotel.
I was in Kenya in April. I mean, talk about the cranes.
Yes.
Talk about the cranes. Those highways and Ibbo, you're one of those senior first senior African civil servants in Zimbabwe in 1918. When you look back, the hope that you talk about now compared to the hope you had in 1980, where are you?
Well, twofold. One is that I feel partly capable.
Why?
Having been there, We saw the rot taking place. We saw the Gukurahundi taking place. We saw Mugabe going off the rails. Well, fortunately for me, in that hindsight, I was fired 1990 through you.
I thought you were not going to mention that, but anyway, yeah?
Yeah, remember
the story, yeah?
We used to have this annual review ups, and Trevor was the editor of the Financial Gazette. So a young man asked me in the meeting at Park Lane, what do you think of the one-party state? I said, it's out of touch with reality. And it was the headline next morning. And that day...
You got fired.
The Zanu Congress was on. I don't know where, but I got calls. And I got fired. 2 reasons they gave. One was that I was delving into politics as a civil servant.
And that was the setting in of the road.
Yeah. So
because what you did was stand up and speak your mind.
Yeah.
And what I did was to report what you said.
No regrets at all. But I think that I feel capable all the same. We're part of this thing, and maybe the first mistake that was made by us was to break the patriotic front and decide we're at Lancaster. We're at Lancaster as patriotic front. When we got home, no one told us why. I remember confronting the leadership. I said, "Why are you doing this?" He said, "Oh, the people at home have told us that if you go ZAPU, you lose." I said, "How is that possible? ZAPU is going to win that part of the country," which they did.
Yeah,
26. And we win this part of the country. That is the alliance.
100%.
Yes. Oh, but the rot went beyond our time.
The rot or Ibbo, which is I think the last issue that I want us to handle before I get on to books. Do you think this toxicity that we have, this hatred of the other, if you are perceived to be that one, Ibbo gets a label because he has said something which is closer to Zanu PF or closer to CCC. There is hatred. People will abduct people to torture them because you have different views from them. Does it come from there, and can it be cured?
It can be cured. It requires leadership.
That's it.
Leadership can be stopped tomorrow, but the leadership sadly are capable.
Absolutely.
This is where the problem is.
On both sides.
On both sides.
On both sides.
Yeah.
I must say that because every time I say
but particularly on the state side.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, the state has monopoly of violence.
Violence, yeah.
They have monopoly of violence.
Yeah.
But we ought to get to a point where our opposition also realize that they're a government in waiting. And that their conduct, their pronouncements also ought to measure up to people that are government in waiting. 100%. The government of the day has monopoly of violence, and therefore should conduct themselves in a much better, serious way than what we're seeing right now. I want to put you on the spot. You are a publisher. Are there any books that you'd recommend for our viewers? Love books. Put you on the spot, but you're an academic, you're an intellectual. Any books that you'd recommend? 3 books that would help us understand the state of African politics, the state of African political economy.
One that I always treasure so much is David Coate, Under the Skin. The Death of White Rhodesia.
Right.
I think it's a compulsory reading.
Okay.
Yes. The other is the one-party state debate, which I edited with Sachikoye. And one which is still from our library, which is still very much in vogue, is Zimbabwe, the Political Economy of Transition, 1980 to 86. It was the first, one might say, confession by those academics, intellectuals, that 6 years after independence, we already failed. So it's kind of a confession. But also sits with all the people that you can think of, Sam Moyo,
the late
Dan Delela, Lloyd Sachikoye. It's an important book. On the other hand, We are looking forward to autobiographies. Yes, he got that. When is yours? I've started mine now.
I look forward to reading that.
And I also have one coming up with Mudambo.
We need to write more, isn't it?
Yeah,
we need to write more.
Yeah.
Ibbo, thank you so much for coming. I love what you do. And, for people out there, for Zimbabwe to get out of this, I think it's important for us to build institutions. And what you're doing is exactly that with the SAPES Trust, for us to be engaged citizens. And through the platform for concerned citizens, it's exactly that. And not to be afraid to be different. That's very important.
Courage.
Absolutely. Courage, which a lot of people out there don't have.
Yeah.
So, Ibbo, thank you so much, my brother, for
thanks,
coming at very short notice.
It's good to see you.
Thank you. Remain sitting there. Allow me to tend to our viewers who are all over the continent, all over the world. Thank you so much for your support. Remember, we are a weekly show. We are out every Monday at 7 a.m. Central African time. To ensure that you don't miss out on any of these quality conversations, such as one I've had with my brother Ibbo here, please press subscribe, like, and share. And by the way, we've gone a step further and create and put all our content on our website and podcasts there for your listening pleasure. And we love your comments. We read your comments and we love your suggestions. So thank you so much for your support. Until next time, cheers to you all.